Don't bother coming to the family reunion. We're cutting ties. That was the voicemail I got from my father at 7:42 p.m. on a Thursday night. No explanation. No lead up. Just those words. Cold. Practiced. Like a business memo, not a message to his only daughter. By the time I finished listening, my hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't pounding. I just felt still, as if something I had quietly suspected for years had finally been confirmed out loud. I didn't call back. I didn't ask why. I just texted him 2 words. Understood. Then I quietly logged into the loan management portal I had access to, the one tied to the commercial property that supported my family's 3rd-generation business. And I removed my name. That signature, given out of trust 2 years ago, was the only thing standing between their expansion and bankruptcy. I never imagined I'd need to revoke it. But then again, I also never imagined being disowned by voicemail. It took less than 6 minutes. By the time I got up from my desk, the weight I'd been carrying for years had already begun to lift. 36 hours later, I woke up to 78 missed calls from Mom, 13 from Dad, 7 from my older brother, and 1 voicemail from my father's accountant that ended with him screaming, "We need to talk." Immediately, that was the moment I knew. They didn't cut me off. I had finally cut them loose. You don't grow up in a family business without learning that the word family often comes second. My father, Richard, built his company the way he built our household. Brick by brick, rule by rule, with very little room for softness. He ran a chain of auto shops across the state. By the time I was 12, I could read profit and loss sheets better than bedtime stories. By 16, I was doing the payroll for shop number 3 during school breaks. It was never a request. It was an expectation. "We don't hire outsiders," he used to say. "We raise replacements." The business became the family, and loyalty was the unspoken currency. You didn't question decisions. You didn't complain. And you definitely didn't talk back. My older brother, Mason, was always the heir apparent. He could skip responsibilities and still be praised for potential. I, on the other hand, was the invisible backbone, organizing files, correcting his mistakes, smoothing over his tantrums during investor meetings. My mother? She stayed out of it. Her job was to host Smile, and occasionally remind me to be grateful for what your father's building for us. For a long time, I tried to earn my place. I got my MBA top of my class, turned down a competitive job offered to stay and help expand the business when they wanted to launch a new headquarters. I negotiated the lease terms, secured the best rates, and at the last minute, when the bank asked for a second signer for the operating loan, I didn't hesitate. I signed, because I was raised to believe that family was forever. That if I showed I was loyal, I'd finally be seen. I was wrong. The cracks started showing last year when I questioned some of Mason's expense reports. He'd been billing personal trips to the company card, private dinners labeled client meetings. When I brought it up to my father, he dismissed me flatly. "Don't nitpick your brother. He's learning." 2 months later, they removed me from board meetings to streamline decisions. I was given vague updates, handed edited reports, and told not to worry about the finances. And then the reunion invite came, or rather, it didn't. Just that voicemail. Cold. Final. Strategically timed right after I submitted a financial report to the bank that flagged misuse of funds under Mason's name. That wasn't a coincidence. That was a cover-up. And I wasn't family anymore. So I stopped being their safety net. And that's when things truly began to collapse. In hindsight, the signs were everywhere. But when you grow up craving approval, you become fluent in denial. The first real crack was subtle. It was during a budget review, a routine meeting where I pointed out that one of our vendors had submitted duplicate invoices, about $12,000 in padded costs over 3 months. I flagged it immediately, expecting a quick fix. But Mason laughed. "It's a friend of mine. Let it slide. We'll get better terms later." I brought it up to Dad after the meeting. Calmly, professionally, he didn't look up from his desk, just muttered, "You need to stop acting like an outsider." That word stuck in my ribs for weeks. Outsider. Despite managing logistics for 4 expansions, renegotiating our fleet lease at half the cost, and keeping our books spotless for 6 years, I was still just a liability if I asked too many questions. After that conversation, My access to back-end systems slowly shrank. First, I was removed from vendor communications. Then, my login to the loan dashboard stopped working. The company credit card they'd given me expired, but wasn't replaced. Every time I asked, I was told there was a system update or temporary reallocation. And yet, Mason got a new office chair that cost more than my first car. I started keeping a private folder on my home computer. I reactivated an old contact at the bank, someone who owed me a favor, and casually asked to review the company's loan structure. What I found wasn't shocking, just disappointing. The loan we had taken 2 years earlier to expand into regional markets, the one that was supposed to fuel our future, was underwritten with 2 names, my father's and mine, and the payments barely being made. The company was behind. The collateral terms were close to default. And worse, my name was being used to keep creditors patient. Because I had excellent credit, because I had no debt, because I was the responsible one. And yet, I wasn't even being told the truth. I started pulling everything I could. Internal spending reports, emails Mason sent under my name, records of where the funds were going. That's when I realized this wasn't just betrayal. It was strategic exploitation. They'd been phasing me out of the family, but keeping me just close enough to cash in on my signature, until they didn't need me, until I flagged the truth to the bank. And suddenly, I wasn't family anymore. I was inconvenient. When the voicemail came, it didn't shatter me. It confirmed everything I already knew, and it gave me permission to do what I'd already started preparing for. I didn't respond emotionally. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. Instead, I took a deep breath, opened my laptop, and clicked into the secure folder I'd labeled Redemption Plan. Inside, a digital copy of the loan agreement I had signed 2 years ago, evidence of loan misuse, my communications with the bank, a termination request Danielle had drafted weeks earlier. Yes, the same Danielle from law school, the woman who had helped Elena take down her husband in a different life. Some connections are worth keeping. Danielle and I had reviewed the terms multiple times. I had signed as a co-applicant, but not as a guarantor. That meant if I formally withdrew my name before restructuring, the bank was obligated to notify the business and requalify the loan without me. And without me, their financial standing crumbled. Danielle said one line that stayed with me. Don't scream, don't warn. Just move the brick holding the wall up and let it fall. So that's what I did. I submitted the withdrawal online. It took 4 minutes. Then I emailed the bank my evidence, vendor fraud, personal misuse of funds, and changes in my access that proved I was being deliberately shut out. The bank froze the account within the hour. Quietly, no notice to them. They needed time to review the irregularities. In reality, they were scrambling to calculate how risky this loan had just become. And while they scrambled, I called the accountant. Mine, not my father's. I explained the situation. We went over my exposure, personal credit impact, and asset protection. I'd moved my savings into a trust the week before. My credit lines were now firewalled. They couldn't touch me. Then I waited. 36 hours after I removed my name, the messages started. My mom's missed calls. Mason's texts. What the hell did you do? Dad's emails, call me now. Urgent. And finally, a voicemail from his accountant, voice shaking with panic. The loan is collapsing. The bank's pulled support. We're at risk of default. You need to fix this. Now. I played it twice, not because I didn't understand, but because it sounded like justice. And justice, when it finally arrives, doesn't scream. It echoes. The first call I answered was from my mother. Her voice trembled, not with anger, but with desperation. Sweetheart, what's happening? Your father says the bank is freezing the accounts, that they might recall the loan. They said, you signed something. I stayed silent for a moment, then said, I removed my name. That's all. Her breath caught. But you can't just do that. Actually, I can. And I did. Elena, she whispered, this affects all of us. No, I replied gently. You made sure it didn't. Click. I didn't owe them explanations. Not anymore. The next day, the family business's accounts were officially marked as non-compliant. The bank sent a formal notice of default review. citing evidence of financial misconduct and unauthorized transactions. Mason was listed as the primary financial officer. He tried to blame it on a clerical error. It didn't work. Vendors started pulling out. A local news site ran a quiet piece. Family auto chain faces financial turmoil amid internal disputes. I didn't leak the story, but I knew who did. Danielle said it best when she called to update me. When people lose power, they look for someone to blame. They just didn't expect that person to have already walked away. The voicemails became more aggressive. From Dad, "You ungrateful child. We built that business for you. You're ruining your future." From Mason, "You think you're so clever, but you'll need us someday." From the accountant again, "Do you understand what this means? You've destroyed their legacy." What none of them could admit was that they had destroyed it long before I pulled out. They destroyed it when they used my name but denied me a seat at the table. They destroyed it when they decided I was a threat, not a daughter. They destroyed it the moment they made me invisible. Now, the loan was caving in, the trust between partners gone, the business teetering on collapse. And I was untouched. No legal backlash, no financial liability, just clean credit and a quieter inbox. I forwarded the last voicemail to Danielle and deleted the rest. And then I took my phone off silent for the first time in 2 days. Because the storm they created was no longer my responsibility to clean up. They called a family meeting. Not because they wanted to fix things, but because they had finally realized I was the only one who could. They picked the same restaurant we used for birthdays growing up. Same private room. Same table near the fireplace. But this time there were no balloons. No toasts. No laughter. Just Dad, Mom, Mason, and an empty chair waiting for me, as if they still believed they had the right to summon me. I walked in 15 minutes late, on purpose. Mason stood as I entered. "Thanks for coming." "I didn't come for you," I said, taking a seat. "Let's not waste each other's time." Dad leaned forward. "You made your point. Loud and clear." "No," I said calmly. "The bank made my point. I just stopped protecting your lie." His jaw tensed. "We're trying to hold this together. You think you're punishing us, but you're punishing the legacy your grandfather built." "Grandpa didn't build a legacy," I replied. "He built a garage. You turned it into a dictatorship." Mason scoffed. "Oh, come on. We gave you everything." I looked him dead in the eye. "You gave me a job, not a voice." The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, my mother spoke, quietly. "What do you want, Elena?" And that was the question, wasn't it? What did I want? Not revenge. I had already taken that. What I wanted was clarity. I stood, placing a sealed envelope on the table. "This is a signed affidavit confirming I've permanently withdrawn from the company loan, the board, and all business operations. You will never use my name again." Dad opened his mouth. "I'm not finished," I said. "I'm also submitting an anonymous tip to the state auditor. There are funds missing, vendors unpaid, payroll inconsistencies. It's your mess now. Fully. Legally." Mason's face went red. "You'd destroy us over ego?" "No," I said, collecting my purse. "I'm not destroying anything. I'm just removing the illusion that I was ever part of it." As I walked toward the door, my father said the last thing I ever expected. "Elena, please." I paused, not from hesitation, but from satisfaction. Then I said, without turning around, "You left a voicemail telling me we're done. I'm just agreeing with you, formally." And then I walked away. I thought walking away would feel like a fall. But it didn't. It felt like finally breathing in a room where the air wasn't rationed. For the first time in years, I woke up without checking my inbox for fires I didn't start. My calendar wasn't crammed with meetings I wasn't invited to speak in. And my phone didn't ring unless someone actually wanted to hear from me. I moved into a small loft downtown, open windows, quiet mornings, and enough space for both a desk and my peace of mind. I started consulting for small women-run startups, helping them do what I was never allowed to do, make decisions. Turns out the skills I sharpened in silence were gold in the right hands. One of my first clients asked why I left the family business. I told her, because I stopped confusing being useful with being respected. She nodded like she'd heard those words in her own life too. I saw Danielle often. We met over coffee, and she kept trying to convince me to start something official, a boutique firm that helps women get out of toxic business ties and protect their futures. We sketched out a name on a napkin, Anchor and Flame, because sometimes you steady a ship, and sometimes you burn it down. Within a month, we had our first 3 clients, not just women from broken partnerships, but daughters, wives, and sisters who'd been told they were part of something until they dared to ask for control. Helping them didn't heal me. It reminded me that I'd already done that. I didn't need apologies from my father, or respect from my brother, or recognition from anyone who had trained me to shrink. I had what they never gave me, not inheritance or legacy, but freedom. And freedom, once it's tasted, doesn't settle for less. 3 months after Courtroom settled it all, I got one final envelope from the family business. It wasn't from my father or Mason. It was from the bank. Inside was a simple letter. The commercial loan tied to your name has been fully transferred and settled. No further obligation remains. No, thank you. No apology. Just a clean line drawn in ink and legality. I smiled. Closure doesn't always come from the people who hurt you. Sometimes it arrives as a final balance statement with zeros across the board. I placed the letter in a file marked complete and slid it into the back of my cabinet. That night, I lit a candle on my loft windowsill and opened the window wide. Outside, the city hummed, distant but alive. I thought about that voicemail one last time. Don't bother coming to the reunion. We're cutting ties. They wanted silence, obedience, absence, and they got all 3. But what they didn't expect was that I would thrive in that silence. That I would build something not out of revenge, but out of truth. That I would become more than the invisible daughter they used for signatures and silence. I poured myself a glass of wine, opened the latest client file, scribbled a note to a woman named Mira, whose husband had locked her out of their bakery's books. Under it, I wrote, "You're not difficult. You're just finally visible." The candle flickered. The air moved. The city didn't stop, and neither would I. And that was the last time I thought of it as cutting ties. Because ties can strangle. But letting go is how you learn to stand alone and still stand tall.